Tell us a little bit about what you saw and being able to relay that message to Cora when you watched Kimbrel pitch and kind of help out so he wasn't tipping his pitches.
So tipping pitches, we hear about it all the time.
People at home understand what tipping pitches is all about.
It's amazing.
And that's remarkable.
Alex, it's our first episode of the year, 2026, year 9 of doing the Tipping Pitches podcast. We're coming up on a decade, to borrow a phrase from my friends at Blank Check, a decade of dreams. This is more like a decade of nightmares, but...
Decade under the influence, you might say.
A decade under the influence of Marxism. I thought it'd be a nice occasion, first episode of the year, we just took a couple weeks off, to start the podcast with an email that we got. This is a very community-driven show that we do here. Our listeners are as important to us as any of the topics that we talk about. And we got an email from listener Grace. I'm just going to read it for you. Hi, guys. I'm watching a bizarre episode of Shark Tank at the gym, featuring one Alex Rodriguez as guest shark.
First of all, Shark Tank, always on at the gym. They love playing that at the gym.
Hustle culture, dude. Grind set.
Seriously.
Change your life. The gang is going off about bootstrapping your business. See right there. Bootstrap it. And Mr. Rod interjects to say that he loves people with a PhD. I was so primed for the PhD in getting back up special. But then he says, not a PhD from Harvard or Yale. No. I mean PhD. Poor, hungry, and driven. It doesn't make much grammatical sense with the acronym and the issue of possession, but he absolutely crushed the delivery. Even more masterfully, he delivered this in between scraping the absolutely nasty-looking protein donut on offer out of his teeth. A true pitchman. So, are you guys familiar with PhD, poor, hungry, and driven? Or is this a new A-Rod special that he's workshopping for future landlord conventions? Thank you for your unique expertise. Your unique expertise is that's a real rural juror situation. P.S. As I finish writing this, A-Rod just lost the deal to Lori. R.I.P. Poor, hungry, but not driven enough, Mr.
Clearly.
Rod. Is this new to you? Are you familiar with this?
I'm not familiar with this. You know what? This was an oversight on my part in my hours of research. This was not something that I turned up. So thank you to Grace for sending this along. I was nearly in tears reading this, weeping in awe, frankly, of his grace, his mercy.
Nearly in tears, weeping in awe.
I also just want to say I'm now a little bit disappointed we did this cold open after recording our episode to come with Michael Baumann, because I think if we discussed protein donuts with him in the context of our discussion to come, his head might have blown off. So I guess for all of our sakes, maybe it's a good thing we shielded him from that.
A protein donut. Would you try it?
I'm not sure. I think it kind of defeats the purpose of a donut.
Yeah. For people who are listening right now, they're not going to know the context of why Baumann would be so upset
That's
by the
correct.
protein donut,
Yeah.
but you really got to not only listen to the end, but you have to be listening through on Patreon too to hear the truth of his opinion about macros. While he was doing that rant, I was like, it's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me, out here tracking my macros in 2026, just trying to. I feel like I've gotten to a good place with it, It's like, I'll track them, but I'm not going to let it ruin my life when I'm not hitting them.
That's good.
I'm not thanklessly committed to a 75-gram breakfast every single morning.
Even better. When 6 Eggos can get the job done, brother.
Bro, I wish you ate 6 Eggos for breakfast. What's your breakfast like? You need to be consuming more at breakfast.
The iced coffee's not going to do it for me?
No, it's not going to do it. It's going to make you feel crazy.
Yeah. We're all a little crazy, aren't we?
But the acids in your stomach, I'm worried about them.
Yeah, I know. Me too. Every morning at like 11:30 a.m., I'm like, Jesus Christ, why do I do this to myself every day?
when the acid from the light roasted coffee that you're drinking, the black coffee, is starting to erode a hole in your stomach lining, that's when you start to question why you did that to
I'm
yourself.
like, does everyone feel like their stomach is imploding all the time, or is that a me problem?
I've decided I'm going to conquer my stomach issues in 2026. I just thought you and the listeners should know.
Let's go.
I'm still working on the branding for this, but last year when I turned 29, I branded it as good to go by 30. All my health issues solved by 30.
Yeah,
but we need something that's a little bit more expansive for the entire year of 2026.
Yeah.
How about this? I got
Tummy
something
26.
For you. Feel sick 2026. Sick like good.
Like rad.
Yeah.
Like feeling tubular in 2026.
Totally.
Tubular 2026.
See, feel sick 2026 rhymes.
That is good. Yeah.
Feel tubular 2026. We got clunkiness. I don't know. I'm working on it. Listeners, you could help. This email from Grace was so wonderful and gave us such great content. So maybe listeners can write in to help me with my branding, because everyone needs to be branded these days.
Yeah. Well, you and I are, right? The blood oath we did.
That's blood oath is different than branding. The pun didn't even work there.
I know it didn't. It really didn't. I'm sorry. I'm poor and hungry and not very driven right now. So
I am really hungry. Actually, I forgot to eat lunch. So Feel Sick 2026 is not.
Someone didn't have 6
today.
Eggo waffles at 1 p.m.
Did you really eat 6 Eggo waffles at 1 p.m.?
Of course I did.
That's why this podcast turned out so good.
Exactly.
Did you buy these waffles yourself at the store?
Well, I literally got back at like 4 p.m. yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I
From where? Where were you?
Not here. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I had handcuffed myself to MLB headquarters up in Midtown, saying, "Let me in."
Until you could help them figure out what's going on with the RSNs.
Yeah, exactly. They did let me in, and I didn't really know what to do. And I was kind of like, oh, okay. It was sort of a January 6th scenario, actually, where I got in and was like, I wasn't really sure what I was expecting here. And then I turned around and walked out.
I really thought January 6th jokes were going to have more staying power, but they don't seem to have made much of an impact in the culture anymore.
So much has happened. How could they?
But that's a pretty big one, though. You know,
it really is.
I got a lot of mileage for like 2 years out of, joking that I was going to make plans for us on January 6th.
Yeah,
I think even on the last podcast episode that we did, I made a J6 joke about you, that you were like going to Washington or something.
Right. So they've had staying power for one person at least.
Well, I think more than one person's listening to this podcast.
It's true.
No one's tuned out because of the J6 jokes. I guess maybe that's possible that they could have.
Right. Well, the rioters did when they were in prison, obviously, but I think we have them all.
That wasn't very long. Okay. I mean, sure. The more
first episode of the year, baby.
The more important thing that has happened throughout January over the years is the state of labor in baseball.
Yes.
A different kind. It's more of an intellectual insurrection than a physical one, where we are joined by FanGraphs staff writer. I forgot to ask him what his official title is. He writes at FanGraphs. He used to be a coworker of mine at theringer.com. He is Michael Baumann. This is the 7th year that we have been joined by Mr. Baumann to have a wide-ranging discussion on the nuances of labor, consumer capitalism, baseball, arbitration, salary caps, protein, jalapenos, regional sports networks, golden eras of baseball labor, A's,
and some hockey, naturally.
The insurgent Pittsburgh Pirates.
It
just we do really get into the shit.
Yeah.
Almost right away, in which we have a discussion unrelated to baseball labor about architecture and France.
That's true. We did. I kind of memory hold that, frankly.
You
Even though
memory
it was
hold
only an
because
hour and a half ago.
you started it with such a bad opinion. Such a bad opinion.
No,
and people are about to hear it in mere minutes, but before they do, I am Bobby Wagner.
No, I need the listeners
I
to
am
let
Bobby
me
Wagner.
know whose opinion
I
is
am Bobby Wagner.
I feel very confident. And I am correct and vindicated in my take.
You are listening to Tipping Pitches. Michael Baumann seems to be reluctantly back on the podcast. We asked him how he was, and he said, you know.
No,
Hi, Mike.
what I said was just fucking kill me, man.
I was censoring it, for all of our listeners who, in the 7 years since we started doing this podcast, have had kids or something who know English now.
Whatever. They're going to learn that word soon enough.
What's up, man? How are you? It's good to podcast again with you. I said before we started rolling that in the year since we recorded last, the room behind you has gotten some, it appears to be scarves. Are those some soccer scarves that you've put up on the wall?
I have from Philadelphia Union, Arsenal, St. Pauli from Germany, and Zenit St. Petersburg.
What's going on with Arsenal this year? I heard it was like a good start and then some tragedy.
We're the
but it's
best
back
team
on
in
track.
England. Won
Best
4-1 this morning. Yeah.
You refer to Arsenal as we. This is a we situation for you?
So this is a nice thing about going back mostly into baseball only journalism is I can become a fan of other sports again.
Yeah. Because the state of journalism is so serious again that if you showed your baseball fandom, they'd kick you out.
Really, I think if there was one thing I learned from, 9 years of working for Bill Simmons, it's that you really need to have those strict formalities in order to have journalistic credibility.
I'm not familiar. Bill who? Who is this? Is this the guy that I see on Netflix sometimes?
No, it's the head football coach at Clemson. They call him Dabo.
Right.
Hi, Alex. What's up? I haven't talked to you in a little while. Alex has been gallivanting around Europe.
I have.
Have you been honing your labor thoughts over there?
Mm-hmm.
In the home of Marx?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I didn't visit his grave this time. I did last time I was there. But I did. It is always fun being on a family vacation and then being like, can we go to this church where these revolutionaries were lined up against a wall and shot? Like that would be very, very meaningful to me. And they're like, the Eiffel Tower is right there too. Like we could go do that.
Who cares about the Eiffel Tower?
Yeah.
Here's a take for you. It's not even.
We got one in Las Vegas.
Mike has his trademark consumer rant coming later in the podcast, which he's described to us as sort of a poo-poo platter of consumer rants this year. It's going to be several rolled into one. I am going to start a series in 2026 called My Hot Takes About Art and Architecture, and mine is that the Eiffel Tower is incredibly overrated. It doesn't make any sense in where it's put. I don't get it. I don't understand why.
What do you mean it doesn't? Hang on. What do you mean it doesn't make sense? It's a monument. It's a piece of public sculpture.
When I look at it,
I don't know.
feel
ask the
nothing.
fucking French, man.
I feel nothing. I try not to ask the French very many things. Where are you at on the French these days?
On the French? I like the French. Not enough to stop me from calling them the French, but
the French parentheses derogatory.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is off to a
French
stellar
are solid.
start.
I definitely like them better than the British now, but
and yet you refer to Arsenal as we. We're the best in England.
I mean, Arsenal's basically a French team. Well, now it's basically a Spanish team, but
this is going straight over my head.
I do think I want to say, I just chime in here to say that the Eiffel Tower is good and incredible, really. You want to know what sucks? French food. That's a cuisine.
I like that take. I'm with that.
What?
It's not bad. It's
just fine. But I think people like to say that French food is their favorite because it sounds very refined. It's like, oh, I like my tartare and my snails and my this and that. It's fine. It gets the job done. It's uninteresting to me.
You have any boeuf bourguignon? when you were over in France?
No, I got a hamburger, like the American that I am.
No, hamburgers are low-key French. That's a French food. The Americans have bastardized it. That's a bad take, and especially coming from you, because I understand what you're saying about like, oh, if the French invented fine dining and fine cuisine, it's like whatever. But actually, no, French food is mostly just butter and salt. And I think of you as one of the predominant butter and salt defenders in the world.
It's true.
So for you to renege on us this early in a new year, it really we're reeling. We're reeling over in the butter and salt team.
We're coming out strong this year, you know? We're defying gravity.
At the end of last year, I shared a take that Leonardo da Vinci's art sucks.
Mm-hmm.
That was my take. And so now I'm keeping that energy heading forward into 2026 and slandering the Eiffel Tower. Who knows what comes next? Keep listening.
I don't know. Those specific takes make me think you don't know. I actually don't know enough about art to judge either of them, but like engineering, it feels like you don't know anything about.
Well, I mean, I would argue like I'm not mad at the architectural soundness of the Eiffel Tower, the engineering structure of it.
It's a beautiful thing. It's
not though.
It's iconic. It was first of all, it was a marvel of engineering in its time.
It is iconic. I'll give that to you. But not all iconic things.
They didn't have AutoCAD and shit to put that up.
I'm not like anti-steel. I'm not anti-structures that stand
you're more
for
of a prompt engineer these days.
I think everybody's just like City of Lights, so romantic. I don't find the Eiffel Tower particularly romantic. I just don't. I'm sorry.
Okay, what's an edifice that you do find romantic?
The Chrysler Building. That's
what is that if not?
That's Art
What
Deco.
is that if not an Eiffel Tower that's in a cruder material and sullied by capitalism?
These days, it's not as sullied by capitalism as they would like to be. It's crumbling and no one will pay for it. Okay, speaking of things that are crumbling and no one will pay for, Major League Baseball. We're here to talk about the state of labor in 2026. As I mentioned, this is the 7th time that we have done this. 7 years. 7 years. Do you feel as spry as you did when we first did this exercise, Mike?
Absolutely not.
How about your brain? Is your brain sharper than it was 7 years ago?
Look at me
when we did this exercise.
I feel like I was almost as young when we started doing this as you guys are now. And
is that true?
Time is a predator, man.
Time is a predator. For those of you who this is the first time you're listening to the state of labor in baseball, this is just somewhat of a meeting of the minds for us to get some thoughts out. Obviously, every week on this podcast, more or less, we talk about labor and its state. But this is an opportunity for us to both reflect backwards and look a little further in the future than we are typically comfortable in doing. That's particularly relevant this year, since at the end of the year there's the expiration of another Major League Baseball CBA. I believe this makes it our third CBA covering. This makes the third CBA we've covered while doing this podcast, which is kind of wild to think about. I want to start kind of broadly. I sent over a list of topics. Do any of those topics stand out to you in particular that you'd like to start with? For the listeners, I will edify them. Those topics are players as stocks, minor league ownership consolidation under private equity, the A's and Pirates propaganda spending, the middle class of the baseball player disappearing, the Tarik Skubal ARB case, a late-breaking state of labor topic, continued RSN implosion, and Manfred closed-door meetings. That's sort of what's in the Michigas this year. But, Mike, you are a refined thinker about labor and its impact on the sports that we love. What's top of mind for you?
Well, I just wrote about the A's and Pirates propaganda spending, so that's definitely the thing that I have the most developed thoughts on, so we can start there. The Skubal case is interesting. I'm more interested to hear what you guys think than... I don't think I'm going to break any new ground there, but I don't know.
Alex, do you consider yourself an A's fan today? By the time this podcast comes out, that answer might change.
It's going to change.
Color the nature of the conversation.
Well, these days, I haven't. I've gone out of my way not to wear my A's cap over the last, I would say, 6 to 8 months or so. So I don't think so. A neutral observer, I don't
know. They keep moving east. They might make their way back to you.
If you love something,
going
let it
across
go.
The country, being chased out. They're like Joseph Smith in reverse.
Right. I see John Fisher in the mirror behind me. It's brutal.
It's like a horror movie when they're looking in the mirror, they open it to grab something, and they close the mirror again, and someone's standing behind them.
That's exactly
you and
what it's
John
like.
Fisher.
Yeah, and somehow my feet are always touching with his in that.
Okay, A's and Pirates spending. Let's start here. Why is this particularly relevant to you?
Well,
Mike?
So I had this question because the A's and Pirates have been relatively, I think we could say relatively active in free agency in terms of
by their own standards, sure.
Yeah, but it's not a high bar, but I think it's important to recognize that when these teams that have been very disinterested in getting better have made these subtle steps to actually do that, especially the Pirates, who are just like the biggest joke franchise in baseball. And so I was curious about this because I remember the spending orgy right before the last lockout, and how that followed the Capitol strike. You know, we remember Bryce Harper and Manny Machado and Lance Lynn, three, I think, equally important players all waiting until spring training to sign their big free agent contracts. And then,
I'm just going to give you this one. You fought this battle for so long. I'm just going to let it slide.
So we go into this lockout on this narrative of, oh my God, teams are spending big. And I don't think it made an iota of difference in terms of the narrative and public perception of that lockout. But I was curious if, not to go so far as to accuse these teams of collusion, but
never
to, make a concerted effort to say, hey, even the Pirates were busy in free agency this year. And the Pirates, I think with that pitching staff and even a mediocre offense, which they're probably still a couple bats from being mediocre, they go 80 and 82 this year. I think that, it's pretty competitive. It'll be the best Pirates season in like a decade. And so I was interested to see if the last bottom few teams were really kicking up their payroll, or at least giving the appearance of kicking up their payroll in the last minute right before the end of the CBA to try to spin that narrative that no, all 30 teams are competing, and there are sort of mixed results. So I looked at the 5 teams that I set certain markers for how crappy the team is. I think it was if they had missed the playoffs each of the past 3 years or lost 100 games once in the past 3 years. And they were also, I think, not even halfway to the last luxury, or to the lowest luxury tax threshold in 2025. And I looked at how they spent last offseason, how they spent this offseason, and the A's have been spending quite a bit, but they spent quite a bit last offseason. They had the Rooker and Butler extensions. They signed Luis Severino, which was pretty explicitly a please don't do a grievance against us MLBPA deal. And so what they're doing this year with the Soderstrom extension, trading for Jeff McNeil, whatever you want to say about this normatively, it's very funny that the Mets are dumping salary to the A's. It's not really making much of a difference.
I think it's really funny. I'm personally finding it incredibly funny. I laugh at every morning. I wake up and laugh for 5 minutes about it.
Yeah. I don't know. What's Jeff McNeil going to do with the A's?
Nothing. I'm happy to be rid of him. I'm just wondering whether David Stearns remembers that he has to have a roster of baseball players who are actually okay. Wondering about that.
I think he remembers that he's got half of a roster of baseball players. I don't know what he's going to do about the rotation, but that's on-field analysis. We don't do that here.
No.
But really, so the Pirates actually have kicked up their spending. They were much more active between the Ryan O'Hearn signing, Gregory Soto signing Brandon Lau. They did kick some salary out with the trade of Ke'Bryan Hayes, letting Andrew McCutchen go, assuming he doesn't come back on a similar deal. But I think they're making more of a concerted effort to win, even though what they're spending would be a drop in the budget, in the bucket for a team like the Mets or the Phillies or the Dodgers. And the other teams, not really. Like the Marlins, the Nationals. The White Sox have actually been pretty active. I think they've been opportunistic with Murakami sliding to them. There's I wrote a huge thing about how I don't think he's going to hit. And that's why they were able to get him for $17 million a year when everybody was projecting 20 plus over 5. But they signed Anthony Kay. They made one or two other moves. So a couple teams are making token efforts but like the Marlins and Nationals aren't doing anything. The A's aren't doing anything that they weren't doing last season. So I think it's easy to sell this narrative, but I don't really think it's credible.
Do you think that anyone is buying it? Like on it, because this is the sort of thing that I feel like has happened repeatedly over the last few seasons. And it might on an individual level, right? Like it might help you avoid a grievance on a team-based cases. But broadly speaking, year in and year out, we're still talking competitive balance to the point where even people like Rob Manfred and Dick Monfort or whoever, right? The hawks of the sport are saying competitive imbalance is real, and there's calls for a salary cap, but we'll need a salary floor, included in that. Now that's a broader conversation, but like broadly speaking, do you think this is actually sticking?
Hang on, wait. Before you answer that, Mike, I have some context for you. So last year, the A's finished estimated payroll, according to FanGraphs roster research, which I consider the best for salary because of the way that it calculates it. And also because Michael is employed by them. 79 was their final 2025 payroll. They're estimated to be at 87 this year. The Pirates went from 87 to 95. Obviously, with still room to grow, we are halfway through the offseason, more or less. So that number could creep up, I guess, north of 100 for both teams in theory. An additional piece of context is that the first luxury tax threshold in 2026 for MLB is $244 million. So they have a long way to go before being at half of that number.
Yeah, I think I ended on that caveat that like if the White Sox sign Kyle Tucker and Framber Valdez and end up near the we'll write about that when it happens. Like I'm not. I think it would, like you said, it would be fair to assume some salary growth from now until the end of the offseason, but maybe not, more than a few million. As far as whether anybody's buying it, I have no idea, man. Like I really can't overstate how much I'm the wrong person to ask that question. Cause I think it's not even just like being a lefty or anything. I think it's just, if you know who Anthony Kay is, like you know how baseball works in a way that makes you understand that the Dodgers haven't won the past 10 World Series, that the Dodgers aren't spending twice as much as every other team. And I think that like, that's an argument that's meant for, not to single anybody out, but it's meant for like the morning talk shows. It's meant for like First Take and talk radio and sort of generalists who you can sell. You notice that when the league was trying to launder these salary cap talking points out there, it wasn't through like Passan and Heyman and Bob Nightingale. It was through, generalist reporters, sometimes business reporters, not even sports reporters. And, the infamous MSNBC article that acted like, all the stuff that we've been talking about for the past 15 years hasn't existed. Because I think that's the level that you have to be paying attention to the sport in order to buy that, buy a lot of those talking points.
Interesting that you put it that way, because I can think of a couple of national reporters, maybe one that you just named, who is kind of buying the Pirates spending case. And we don't need to get super specific on this person halfway into the segment or anything, but because you have better relationships with national reporters than we do. But I don't know, the Pirates in particular, it feels like, and maybe this is just because this is my hyperfixation over the last 2 months, but it feels like I've seen a few articles that are like, the Pirates are pressing go. Yeah. And I'm like, are they? I mean, I know that they have a couple prospects that they intend to bring up now, and starting at 95 million with some additional room to grow in theory, while also calling up your top prospects, is the kind of thing that a team normally would take as a first step towards competitiveness. But the Pirates have not earned the benefit of the doubt of us assuming they're going to act as a normal franchise. I
think that's right. And I think it's important to remember that, like, are the Pirates press and go is a different question than do we need a salary cap? I do think a lot of the Pirates stuff is that they have some exciting players, and I think it's very easy to want Paul Skeens and O'Neal Cruz in the playoffs. That's Bubba Chandler and, a lot of the Jared Jones, assuming he comes back. Like, those are the Pirates could be fun. I think the Pirates will be not terrible. Like you said, I think they've still got a long way to go before they're like a playoff contender. But also, like, this is just sort of how prognostication works at this point in the season. Like, you know, the one like take and prediction that I ever had that I got notoriety for at the time was in 2015. I picked the Marlins to win the World Series, and that was like very, very similar, because it was like, they have Jose Fernandez, they have Giancarlo Stanton, they have Christian Yelich, they have like this core where if you squint, maybe, you know, they could be an 88 win team, and then maybe they have the pitching to get him over the line. And like, I remember, like, I went on Levitard to talk about this, and he was like, did they, you know, do you actually believe this, or are you just, you know, doing this for attention? And I was like, no, I'm just doing this for attention. It's fun. Like, you're gonna
What are we doing any of this for?
Yeah, like, what, I'm gonna pick the freaking Red Sox to win the World Series again? I don't even remember who was good in 2015.
The Dodgers were good in 2015.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know. 2015, what? We were sophomores in college, Alex?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we were just a glimmer in the baseball media ecosystem's eyes.
Red-eyed and bushy-tailed.
The Blue Jays were good. They were good. Wasn't that the year
Blue Jays,
of
that was,
the
we didn't
Bautista
know how
walk-off?
good they were going to be yet, because they hadn't traded
That's
for
true.
David Price yet.
Oh, yeah.
That is true. All right. I mean, I think the A's and Pirates propaganda spending, which I think is a really accurate way of saying it, frankly. I think this is straight up propaganda spending. I don't think either of them intend to meaningfully change their financial picture in 2026 at the end of the fiscal year. You know, 79 to 87 or 87 to 95 respectively for the A's and Pirates. Like, that's more or less inflation. I mean, and that still doesn't even outpace, in theory, what they should be getting just day one guaranteed TV revenue based on national contracts and revenue sharing.
I think it's important to, this is kind of dark, but I think about the A's and Pirates almost exactly the same way. I think of Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, where like he was going on TV talking about, you know, saying, get the fuck out of our city, ice, and everybody's like, woo! Mm-hmm. And like, yes, that's the right response. Like, that's the only human thing that you could do. But also, this guy has very much not earned the benefit of the doubt, where we can just assume that's going to be backed up with meaningful action. And sure enough, like, you know, a couple days later, and I think in a very, very, very low stakes version of that, that's kind of how I feel about the Pirates and the A's. That, like, I think the A's could like legitimately be good this year. I think, you know, that's a fun team. There's a lot of power in that lineup. I like the Pirates pitching staff. I think, you know, they've got more non-dog shit hitters right now than they have in a while. You know, I don't think I would pick either of them to make the playoffs, but I think they're going to be very watchable, and we should applaud them, you know, locking up their own players and going out there and making these not earth-shaking, but meaningful acquisitions to fill out that roster. At the same time, let's not assume this is more than what it is.
Yeah, I think this particular spending, like these two teams are the ones that have gotten the most flack because they have behaved the most dramatically on the bottom end. Like, in a way, you know, we don't expect anything of the Marlins. We don't expect anything of the Nationals because they won the World Series and then immediately like turned around and now they're doing a classic rebuild or whatever. We don't expect a lot from these other teams because maybe they've bought themselves a little bit of goodwill in one way or another. Or in the case of the Marlins, like, we've just given up on them as a franchise. But the Pirates have developed enough good players over the last 2 decades that if, you know, it's a popular thing to say if the Pirates had kept all of their all-stars, what would their lineups have looked like over the years? And the A's have just been legitimately good. And so I think that they have gotten, both of these teams have gotten a lot of attention for their mismanagement of their payroll and investment in the on-field product. And on top of the fact that the A's have just totally bungled their organizational role in various cities, and they have one of the most incompetent owners. But I think that this serves as a little bit of a gateway, like the most relevant to franchises when we talk about the idea of a salary cap and whether or not a lockout might happen over it, because this is the type of behavior that owners are getting in line on to get their argument in shape for a salary cap, whether it'll work or not.
I think it's entirely ownership driven. That, like, these two owners have been, I don't even know if bungled is the right word. They've just like been awful noisily. And, you think about Dick Monfort and the Rockies, or Bruce Sherman and the Marlins, like they're generally quieter about this than Bob Nutting and John Fisher have been. And so, this is the tax that they're paying for people knowing who their owner is. And also, like, I think with the Marlins, it's just, I'm not going to assume your listeners know about this, but I did the fan exchange program on FanGraphs this spring, where I assigned people from, if you're a Phillies fan, watch the White Sox for a week. I forget some of the other the other pairings, but just to get a sense of how other teams operate, and bring your conclusions back to your own fandom. I got at least 20 responses from self-identified fans of every team in the league, and teams like the Phillies and the Cubs, Red Sox, Yankees, like close to 100. I got 4 from the Marlins. I think there's just nobody left down there to piss off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they kind of get away with flying under the radar the way they have.
Brutal scenes. I mean, we can, I guess, take this moment to pivot slightly away from sort of the bottom feeders of the league, because I do want to talk about the Tarik Skubal case with the Tigers. This happened while we were on our holiday break, and so we haven't talked about it here on the podcast. So I mean, just for context, right? The Tigers filed for, I think, $19 million offer to Skubal in arbitration, and Skubal asked for, I think, 32, right? So like a $13 million gap, massive gap, obviously, in how they are
the biggest ever.
Yes, biggest ever. And this feels like the kind of story that draws in a lot of these threads that we're going to see in the coming year, right? Sort of revenue streams being impacted by RSN collapses and a disappearing middle class of baseball players. I'm curious sort of what your perspective was, Mike, when you first saw this news, because it's obviously so egregious on its face, but then also feels very representative of kind of the core rot at the system.
I think this is a systemic thing more than a Tigers thing, that the arbitration system is so not fit for purpose anymore. And it's so arcane. Like, you're using the precedents are set using stats that aren't used anywhere in front offices anymore. And so Skubal is sort of behind the 8 ball there. I just the way that the starting pitcher has changed, role of the starting pitcher has changed just since, we're talking about comps for this, like David Price again, like Tim Lincecum, if you're looking for multiple time Cy Young winners. I think this is just a guy who is so good he broke the system. It's interesting because of the rules. One side wins the case and one side loses the case. That really disincentivizes these kind of out there numbers, that you want to be more conservative, so that if the arbitrator thinks, well, Skubal's worth 24 million, does that mean if Boris had come in at 28 instead of 32, like they split the baby and he gets more than half of the baby, so to speak. And yeah, I think
the poor baby.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you split it horizontally or vertically?
I feel like you got to split it horizontal or vertically down the middle, because otherwise, like, no one wants just the bottom half of the baby.
Right. The real question now is, a baby a sandwich?
King Solomon's not an idiot. He's
yeah, is a baby a sandwich? No, a baby is a hot dog, Alex.
Man, that metaphor got away from me really badly.
No, in your defense, I was the one that steered it off I reached over in the car and spun us off the
road. Tarik Skubal's he's a pitcher. And I forget what else I was going to say. I think so weirdly, like, I think Boris may have overplayed his hand a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that for that reason, like, just 32 is a huge 32 is a gross understatement of Tarik Skubal's value in free agency. but it's a huge number to ask for in an arbitration award from an arbitrator who is not, a FanGraphs member, who's not a Tipping Pitches patron. Like
we don't know that. We don't know that.
I think
the Federal Arbitrators Group or whatever they're called, they could be firing this pot up. You never know.
I think he has the point is huge. The moral victory that's going to be won, whether they win this case or not, is going to be big for Skubal and Boris. But I think he's probably radically reduced his chances of actually winning this case by coming in that high. And I don't know. Like, I just really wish we had, I'm going to say this again, the NHL system where free agency's tied to age, not to top tier service time. And before, like, they have arbitration for restricted free agents, but like, you can go out there and say, somebody give me a contract, how much does the market think I'm worth? And then the team can come back and match it. And, that would just be such a better way of allocating, the fruits of labor to the people who generate the most value.
The Skubal thing is interesting on like 100 different fronts. I think it's really hard to predict whether or not he will win the case. We don't know who the arbitrator is. We don't know what the Pirates are willing to do. I think if the Pirates were willing to behave like, let's say, the Astros.
I mean, the Tigers. Have we been saying Pirates the whole time?
No, that was just
okay.
The Tigers. Tarik Skubal just got traded to the Pirates. The Pirates are really all in, Mike.
Well, I was thinking about the Pirates because this is like the guy this is going to impact the most is Paul Skeens.
Mm-hmm. Sure. The how intense the Tigers are willing to be about their argument to make sure that they don't have to pay Skubal $32 million depends on a lot of things. It depends on the competitive direction of the franchise. It depends on RSNs. It depends on, how much money they finished last year with. And it depends on how much they really care about re-signing Skubal. Because if they're just going to go in and let him walk or trade him at the deadline or something, they have no incentive to not just burn his case down at arbitration. I think it's not quite as useful to predict the outcome of it and what that will mean for future guys like Skeens in this current moment, because we're pre the expiration of a CBA. I'm more curious from the perspective of what is Tarik Skubal and Scott Boras, and by proxy MLBPA, because this is a MLBPA structure system as much as it is an ownership system that both sides participate equally. I'm curious what each side is trying to say by where they came in at. I think Tigers are like, ho hum, he made $10 million last year. He should make about 19. But there's more interesting things being said by the Skubal side filing at 32. That is Scherzer-esque behavior from the best pitcher in baseball. Plenty of guys would be happy to file at 26 and force the Tigers to say yes to that.
And that's why it's interesting to me, because they're risking $13 million by coming in so high. I think the Tiger side is pretty easy to see. 19 is about as high as they can go without conceding the point that Skubal is just uncomparable, at which point you might as well just give him whatever he wants. And coming in at 32 is saying, like, this is close to, like Soto and Ohtani and Vlad Guerrero got in the 30s their last year arbitration too.
Yeah, I think Soto got 31.
Yeah. And so by that standard, I don't think it's an outrageous, it's a shoot the moon kind of thing that, I know you just said you don't want to predict the future, but if I'm going to predict the future, I think it's going to cost him quite a bit of money to.
Especially when you consider the fact that many of those guys, if not all of the guys that you just named, were Super 2 guys, which means they were on their fourth year of arbitration.
Right.
Skubal is only on his third, which structurally, the way that ARB works means that he should come in a lot lower than most of those guys.
But, I think it's an attack on the system of, on the arbitration comp system itself. And, that's how I read this.
Does that mean that they're revisiting this in the CBA then in 20? Because, MLB tried to get rid of arbitration during the last round of negotiations. So, I mean, I know that this arbitration is not the sort of the sexiest thing that comes up in CBA talks, but it does feel like a really core part of the negotiations that's going to come up.
I think it is costing the players as a whole an enormous amount of money.
Mm.
I don't think it's going to change. Because I think that as much as the owners are, this system isn't serving anyone, but I think anything the owners agree to would be orders of magnitude worse. I think that would probably be the plan for the owners, is to try to trick the players into getting something that's worse for, that takes even more money off the table, but it's just a different system.
Why do you think it's costing them money? I don't totally disagree in a vacuum, like in a perfect world, but I think that there are a lot of people in the PA. I think there are a lot of players, current and former, who would say that this is the only time that you get to actually argue about your salary prior to free agency.
But you're pegged to lower values than you would get on the free market. This is where, so the system, right? We talked about this dating back to the lockout. The system is based on, you come up around 22 or 23 and you peak at like 30. Like that's how you get paid. And that's how the system was designed in like the 70s. And it just doesn't work like that anymore. Like you could peak at 23, 24 and you're spending your most productive years, the ones where you can, honestly, make the argument that you're delivering $40-50 million a year in terms of on-field value to the team, but you're not only tied into an arbitration system that depresses your salary, like explicitly depresses your salary, and ties you in cases like this to lesser players who came before, or an obsolete valuation system. It also completely eliminates the potential to take your services to the open market like you could in a restricted free agency system, which I don't love that either, but there's no way to upset the paradigm. And I think that Skubal is, in this case, literally paying the price for that.
So you think a restricted free agency system, say after 4 years or 5 years, would be in the long run more beneficial to players than unrestricted free agency after 6, but 3 years of ARB? Like if we just dumped ARB entirely, which is what you would have to do to ever get owners to even consider a restricted free agency, and you'd probably have to go all the way up to 5 years of team control and restricted free agency before you hit unrestricted. Like you think that would be better just based on the nature of that as a slightly freer market? Well, the aging curve, but also restricted free agency requires, I don't want to say dumb owners, but liberal owners, like lowercase l liberal owners, like guys willing to actually offer that first restricted free agency contract and the teams to match it. That is what's been so successful for the NBA, is that there are enough guys who are like, fuck it, I'll pay, Dante Exum in restricted free agency because I'm nothing. I can't get guys to come to my league. I suck at drafting. It's a very, very, very different and I think more complicated calculus for the labor market without a salary cap, like without a top salary that you can offer. Because in theory, we can say all we want about the owners not colluding with each other, but functionally they basically
they talked to the GMs in the NHL. They talked about it openly. That like it wasn't something that you did to sign each other's restricted free agents. And when you did get an offer sheet, it was like once every 3 years, and it was viewed as like this huge antisocial aggressive move. And so if you're talking about like, would I rather have restricted free agency after 4 years and just like minimum salary plus whatever the owner gives out of his own largesse before that? No, but if you replaced it like year to year, 1 year of arbitration equals 1 year of free agent or restricted free agency, that would be much more lucrative for the players, which is why we'll never get it. And, there's got to be this is all negotiation. You got to horse trade something. So
totally. I'm curious about the perspective. The reason I asked about what this says from Boris and Skubal and the PA by filing at 32, because I mean, in theory, everyone has to sign off on that. Obviously, it's the player's choice, but everybody has to be like, yeah, this is the right move, or this is not an absurd move on your behalf. Is 1 year before the expiration of a CBA, or less than 1 year now, you start to wonder, like, what are the things that players are going to rally over? Like, what are the things that are actually going to make an impact to the rank and file? And I'm curious whether or not they think the best pitcher in baseball, who can't get a huge contract offer from his current team, even though he may or may not want to stay with them, filing at 32 and his team filing at 19 and saying, actually, you're only worth 19 coming off back-to-back Cy Youngs. Is this like a rallying cry move? And if so, is arbitration something that they really care about?
I think it could be. I think it would be an easy thing to rally about. Like, it was Corbin Burns, wasn't it? Who, like, actually, I'm gonna say this and it's gonna sound pejorative, but it's not. He got his feelings hurt in his arbitration hearing. And like, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to understand that it's all professional and we're just, discussing numbers across the table. But if you're sitting there listening to, as a Cy Young winner, listening to your team tell you sucked, like, I'm not a big enough man to not take that personally. Like, that sucks, man. You shouldn't have to go through that. And it's
I've
one
never
thing
taken anything personal at a bargaining table in my life. That's never happened.
And it's one thing to hear it across a bargaining table, like you're actually like talking down, you're talking to each other. Like, the team is just telling this other guy who doesn't know shit how much Corbin Burns or Tarik Skubal sucks. And so that, for that reason, I think it's going to be very relatable. Whether that's deliberate strategy in advance of the CBA expiring, like, I am not going to assume that Skubal and Boris are thinking that strategically, or that they're frankly thinking that selflessly. So, it could have that effect, but I doubt very much that that's the primary intended purpose.
I mean, I do wonder whether this would be enough to be even a rallying point for players, given that a scenario like this is frankly relatively rare, that there is such a disparity, or such a clear disparity in what the team is willing to offer a player versus what they're worth on the open market. I mean, I wonder if something like expanding the pre-arb pool that got introduced in the last CBA may come up as another priority. I think it was Ben Clemens over at FanGraphs who just wrote about how it's been a pretty remarkable success in terms of distributing more money to players who actually deserve it before they're able to reach arbitration. So I don't know. Arbitration feels like one of those weird things that, like, it obviously every player goes through it, but these sort of bombshell cases feel somewhat few and far between.
And I think that the owners would do well to learn that lesson, that, like, if you get the most bang for your buck in terms of getting the players on side, the farther, like, to the bottom of the pool you spend that, spend that money. You get, Tarik Skubal's going to make $200, $300, $400 million on his next contract, no matter what. Like, unless there's World War III, he's going to sign a $300 million contract. And so, like,
so it's about a 50-50 toss up then.
I mean, I'm thinking about predictions for my for the Effectively Wild preseason predictions game. World War III might come up.
Please predict something that actually might happen so that we can have Ben win again something, because that was absurd behavior from him. Spiking the football on you guys, and you just sat there and let it happen.
I was more realistic and grounded with my predictions last year than I had been ever. Also, like, I think, I think we've talked about this in the context of the Ringer MLB show, the late lamented Ringer MLB show, that, like,
who's doing the lamenting in that scenario? I
don't know. We had listeners. We had, like,
no, I'm saying,
a couple fans.
Okay, lamented that it's gone. All right, that's what I was asking about.
But, like, you need, in any partnership, you need a Burton and Ernie, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need a straight man and a chaos agent. And I'm constitutionally a straight man.
Uh-huh.
And I keep getting put on podcasts with the most birdest motherfuckers alive. And I have to act like a crazy person in order to keep the energy up. Because, like, Zach Cram isn't going to do anything weird. Meg's not going to do anything weird. So I have to predict death and nudity on the baseball diamond, or else nobody else is going to do it. And last year I reeled myself in and nothing came true. And Ben ended up happy for the first time in the 15 years I've known him.
Uh-huh.
And like you said, spiked the football on us. So not again.
I'm just saying, like, you can't let someone walk all over you in that way on a podcast.
Let has nothing to do with it. Like,
obviously, I don't think arbitration's going away.
No,
it could, in theory, but that would require a level of transformation to the state of labor, to the collective bargaining agreement, that I personally don't think is coming in this round of negotiations. But I will turn the question to you both. Do you view the negotiation of this next CBA as more likely to be incremental or transformative?
I think it's going to be more incremental than the discussion around it has been. There obviously is talk of a salary cap and RSNs going away. I just don't foresee them blowing up a year and a half of baseball to let that actually happen. And it remains to be seen. Who knows? But I think that the players feel pretty dug in, and even ownership has agreed or acknowledged at least that the players likely are not going to give any room on any talk of a salary cap without missing actual games and putting actual pressure on ownership. So, like, I think it's far more likely that we end up seeing harsher penalties at the top of basically a harder soft cap, and maybe more stringent or more strings attached to revenue sharing. And maybe with centralized revenue, there's actually a little bit more visibility into like how that money is being spent on the field. I don't know. I don't see this as the one blowing it all up, especially with Rob Manfred's legacy hanging on the line.
Oh man, that's a great point. No, I think that's exactly right. I view the totality of the history of the 21st century as looking at bear with me.
Oh, I'm locked and loaded. This is like on the roller coaster when they bring down the overhead seatbelt. That was me.
Here we
right
go.
Now. I'm ready to be thrashed around.
So in the second half of the 20th century, during the Cold War, we get these incredible social and diplomatic and technological advances, right? That transform the world from a state of constant precarity and privation to one where, at least in the West, things have never been better by the end of the 20th century. This is end of history stuff, right? And now, 20 years in the 21st century, we've started to take all those things for granted. And people who were too young to remember why we had labor unions or strategic arms limitation or, the Civil Rights Act are like, we don't need this stuff anymore. We've evolved beyond the need for it, or, we didn't need it in the first place. And we're going to learn from first principles why we had all these things in the first place.
That makes 10 straight pods where we've talked about first principles. Thank you, Mike.
That's anti-vaxxerism. That's going to be, I am convinced that, I guess none of us have kids. If you're 30 years old and you have kids, your kids are going to live to see a nuclear weapon fired in anger. That is a take I believe in wholeheartedly, because it's been so long since we've had it done. We're being like, what's the big deal? Because we've done this with every other societal guardrail. And that's what happened in the lockout, because it's been long enough. I joke about how the players are never going to have a salary cap, or they're never going to agree to a salary cap until everybody who's ever met someone who knew Marvin Miller is dead. There was sort of a minor version of that with the strike. That scared everybody so much, and it should have. It was, a traumatic, potentially existential crisis for the league and the sport and the players union. And it scared everybody off from stopping the schedule for 25 years. And as soon as that got one generation out of memory, the owners are like, I don't know, how much electricity could there possibly be in the third rail? Let's just put our hands next to it because it's warm. Let's just give it a little tickle, right? And so we come into, both sides are coming into the CBA negotiation, white hot with passion and engagement, and they've got big goals, and we're talking about a salary cap, and we're talking about moving free agency, and there were a lot of, I think, innovative ideas that got passed around, the first couple months of the offseason, the first couple months of the lockout. And the thing that shocked me the most was how quickly we got right back to they're $20 million apart on the exact same luxury tax system that we had, we've had for the, the whole of the 21st century, basically. And, they argued over something that for the last 6 weeks of the lockout, I was looking at this like, this doesn't matter. Like, the players have already negotiated themselves down to a point where it's just a matter of how much bleeding do they stop, because you can't go backwards in a collective bargaining situation. And so they get up to that point, they stay at that stalemate right up until the point where they're going to have to start losing games, and then both sides blink and come back to the table. And I think that that's more or less what we're going to see this year. I think that there will be some, they'll probably futz with the draft. They'll probably, do some more stuff with revenue sharing as like Alex said, the broadcast revenue becomes more centralized. I think that, that might, this is a little off topic, but I think that one of the best things that the fans and the players have going for us is the rich owners hate paying the poor owners to just put money in their jeans. They want the Pirates to spend, like, we're giving you X amount of tens of millions of dollars to improve your baseball team. Why aren't you fucking improving your baseball team and making the product better so we can all make more money? And so I think we're going to see a little bit of movement on that. We'll probably, the same luxury tax tiers will go up, not as much as they should based on inflation and total revenue growth. And I don't know, we'll play at least 150 games next year, and we'll see very little change from what it was before.
Okay. I think I agree. There are a handful of things that are different this time than last time, and I'm going to list off a couple of those things here.
Okay.
The Dodgers have won 2 straight World Series and 3 out of the last 5. They are spending significantly more. Them and the Mets are spending significantly more than the rest of the league in a way that they were not 3 years ago. RSNs have imploded, and so there is financial instability on the capital side, which leads to radical behavior that goes outside the norm of what we expect a lot of times. And then there's also the Manfred closed door meetings, which are at least an infringement on the social order of how the labor and capital relationship has typically worked in our time covering this relationship since doing this podcast, in a way that caused Bryce Harper to almost assault him physically during the season, while the Phillies were, World Series contenders in theory. So I think that there are more seeds of instability than there have been in the past when we've talked about this. I don't personally think that will lead to the owners blowing it up right now. You could make the argument that the financial instability is a reason for them not to do that exact thing.
That's the argument I would make.
But there are, I would say, longitudinal warning signs that were not there 6 years ago, certainly, and maybe not even 3.
I think the Dodgers thing is a canard. I don't think it's going to matter at all.
What if they win again, though? Like, I think that is enough cover for stupid behavior, frankly.
I think that's going to make a big difference on first take and not a whole lot in the room, because everybody in the room knows what's going on. And like, there's an extent to which Rob Manfred can, not that Rob Manfred's going to go out and say, hey, it's bad for the sport if one of the specific teams that I work for wins all the time. But like, he can bullshit the public in a way that he can't bullshit Tony Clark. So I'm very skeptical that I think there's going to be a lot of noise about that. I'm very skeptical that that's going to make a big difference in the room. The RSN thing, I think that's a good point. I think that and that could go either direction in terms of amping up ownership's willingness to fight. If nothing, I think it's just unpredictable. So that's definitely a wild card that could lead to any number of outcomes. And the closed door meetings, the funniest thing about that is the story that came out on Alan Walsh's podcast of, I think it was Mark DeRosa threatening Bryce Harper. Mm-hmm. Like, there are star players who you can get your way by threatening them. Bryce Harper's like the last guy that I would choose to take that path. It's just between, like, it's one of the dumbest things a Penn grad did in 2025, which is
you
saying
found a way to
something.
make this about Philly. You found a way. Nicely done.
And also, that's a weird clubhouse too. Like, even especially before you take Cassianis out of it, like there are a lot of guys with big personalities and like what I would call syncretic politics or idiosyncratic politics, I guess is the better word for it. That was going to be a rough room for big old Robbie, no matter what he did. So
even having grown up on the hard streets of Rome, New York, and having seen what happened in Woodstock 99, he wasn't prepared for the white male rage of the Philadelphia Phillies locker room.
There is so much white male rage there, but let's say that's representative of the temperature in the average major league clubhouse. I don't think it is. I also don't think that's as bad as it was in 2022 or 2021, coming off of COVID.
Yeah.
After how badly that previous cycle had gone for the players, with new, like with a wartime consigliere in the Players Association, I absolutely believe that there are complicated extrinsic factors, that there's, a lot of distrust between these parties. There's a lot of potential for irrational action, but I don't think any of those causes are worse than they were 5 years ago.
So let me pose this question to you, Alex. I think that often when we talk about the state of labor, we talk about it getting worse because, like Mike just laid out, everything gets exponentially worse, and then maybe it implodes, and then maybe it might get better from that point forward. But at some point, there could be a confluence of factors or a necessitating incident that will cause the Players Association to get really radical, or could cause the Players Association to get really, really radical. But I don't know what that is. And when I try to search for it, I come up pretty empty. Are there a set of circumstances that you think will ever give us another golden era for baseball labor, another post Marvin Miller stepping in and really fighting for some of these founding principles of the union? Or do you think we're just going to get mostly 5% one way or the other for the rest of our lives?
I mean, I not to be like a nothing ever happens guy, but I almost feel like, barring broader societal economic shifts, I don't think that's the kind of thing we're going to see just happen in a vacuum in baseball. I think not to be like it's just millionaires versus billionaires, but I think ultimately there's a fair amount of comfort there, and I'm not sure that the players would actually really be interested in blowing things up and taking what ultimately amounts to a kind of political stand. Especially in this environment. I mean, maybe when we start seeing a generation of minor leaguers who have been through successive rounds of collective bargaining, and if those go poorly or whatever, like maybe generations from now, you have a more radicalized or at least more educated class of players, maybe you see those seeds sprout, but I don't think it's something that we're going to see in the next decade or two, certainly.
And I think so. There is one wild card now that you didn't mention. I thought you were going to, and that's during the last labor negotiation, the NLRB was under the supervision of the most pro-labor president in the past 50 years, as they were very fond of saying, which is true, but also damning with faint praise. This is an option for the owners that they could say, hey, serene, president of God Emperor of the United States, come liberate us from the tyranny of collective bargaining, and say, by presidential fiat, sorry, everybody's making $9.75 an hour again.
Okay, wait. I have a question about that because this is, I don't know if we've been asked this question or if it has just come up before on the podcast. I personally think that MLBPA needs the NLRB least of any union in America.
That's probably true.
They are organized and rich enough that they don't really need the structures. Functionally, we are talking about the most pure in a vacuum version of we could withhold our labor to withhold their capital that there is. They're irreplaceable. No one is going and paying $58 for nosebleed seats to see scabs. Like that just would not happen, especially in seats of 50,000 people. Like, sure, there might be a couple people for a little while as a gimmick to say, let's stick it to those millionaire players who don't know what the average person is going through. But like for 162 games, like that is a fantasy. That is a fucking fantasy. So the set of circumstances that would have to happen for the owners to be like, fuck it, we're going to the NLRB, we're blowing this up, we're going to break the union, we are going to try to desert them, we're going to go full 9, we're going to use the corrupt Supreme Court, we're going to do it all. Like that's suicide. That's self-immolation by the ownership side too, is it not? On the other side of that, what do they get is my question.
They get cheaper labor. They get a dominated labor force. And I don't think it would be smart. I think that it would be just so incredibly unpredictable what would happen from that point. But I also think you're assuming a level of solidarity from the rank and file players that doesn't exist. That okay, Francisco Lindor, who, already made his $350 million and is now, his wife is doing democratic socialist politics, solidarity. But that, they're going to say, the guy who's coming up, Taylor Walls, is going to say, screw this guy. Like, if I can make $7 million instead of $2 million, and I can be the best shortstop in the league, I'll climb over your corpse. I'll climb over the corpse of this entire union. I think that
who's watching that? Who's watching it and who's paying for it though? Like, yeah, you get cheaper labor costs, sure, because you don't have Lindor making 32, but what you already have a teetering TV revenue RSN system. So you would just want to blow it up entirely and say, please, Amazon, give us $1 billion for 5 years of Taylor Walls. MVPs.
This is an entire economy of bubbles. I think if you time it right, you could get that. And it's not, this is what we're learning from. I'm less of a minor league contraction doomer than a lot of people just in terms of the on-field product. But I think if the product is 7% worse and you don't have, in this situation, this is not Taylor Walls playing for the Mets and Francisco Lindor playing for the Red Sox or whatever. This is Taylor Walls playing for the Mets and Francisco Lindor is, handing out flyers in Times Square. He's not doing anything. These guys are not, what if Shohei Ohtani didn't exist? What if Paul Skeens didn't exist? And we've seen, we saw this in golf. There were players who made a principled stand against LIV and they all either went over there or sat around with their dick in their hands when LIV basically bought out the PGA.
Yeah. It's just my feeling though is that golf is different because you're not trying to sell 42,000 seats every night for 162 times a year.
I think that's true.
And that's not a meaningful portion of your revenue. You get it all from TV and luxury sponsorships. It's just a totally different economic system.
Yes. All that's true. Those are good reasons why the nuclear option for the owners would not work. Gun to my head, I don't think it would work out. I think it would work out the way that you say it would, but this is the one wild card thing that actually scares me in terms of, we could lose a significant chunk or all of the 2026 season, is that the Secretary of Labor is no longer the guy who's about to quit his job and go run a sports labor union. It's fucking Reinhard Heydrich or whatever,
Jesus. I agree that the political infrastructure would be there for a doomer, suicidal capital class to pull this move. I just look at the makeup of the current ownership, knowing all that we do, having spent so much time looking into each of these guys, and I see a lot of market guys. I see a lot of money guys. I see a lot of guys who aren't actually that politically motivated ideologically, and they're just I input money, I output money, and this is way too dangerous for those guys. There's too many Steve Cohens, honestly, running teams nowadays to do something.
I think that's a good point. The other danger for the owners is that you go appeal to Trump directly and he'll say, oh yeah, I'll side with the rich guys until like the players union comes back and he's like, that's fucking Paul Skeens. Like, they're like,
he meets Ohtani, shakes his hand, and we have a Mamdani moment.
Yeah, he's like, man, you're awesome, man. Like, and he spends the whole day spends the next 48 hours forgetting to invade Greenland because he's like, Skeens showed me the splinker grip. Like, you forget that, like, this guy is not only a psychopath and an ideologue, he's the biggest starfucker in America.
Totally.
Yeah, all of a sudden he's doing truth socials about how it's actually Tarik Skubal probably could make $32 million in arbitration. Just pay the man.
The weak Illich
Thank you for attention to
children are depriving the people of Michigan of their birthright or whatever. I don't know. I can't do that literary voice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've lost the desire to even try anymore. All right. Well, we have a number of sort of fringe and deeper cut topics that we're going to get to still, as well as Mike Baumann's trademark consumer rant. But we're going to do all of that over on Patreon because this has been a rich and thoughtful and long discussion. Mike here on the public feed, thank you so much for joining us. Anything that you would like to plug? We got Wheelie Sports. We got FanGraphs.
Yeah, I would say you can, if you haven't paid $10 a month for tipping pitches, perhaps you'd consider paying $80 a year for a FanGraphs membership, which would keep the lights on for me and my buddies in the event of a work stoppage. Or you could sign up for Wheelie Sports on Medium or Kit. The link is on my Blue Sky profile. That's my weekly cycling newsletter, which is free. You don't have to pay a dime for it. So,
in this economy,
man of the people.
I don't know. It's more trouble than it's worth. Like nobody, believe it or not, nobody wants to, pay me a meaningful amount of money to hear my cycling takes. So
I would love to. It's just that we're not quite liquid enough yet here.
I was going to say, it was a paid newsletter for 2 years and I didn't see shit from you. So
I just don't follow cycling. I just can't. I mean, I can't. Hey, can't pay for a newsletter for a sport I don't follow.
Summer 2027. Well, now you don't have to. Summer 2027, when there's no baseball on, if you want something that's going to feel like dying slowly during the summer.
Yeah.
I love it.
This ringing endorsement. Dying slowly during the summer. That's great. Okay. Thank you, Mike. We'll see you over on Patreon. Thank you to Michael Baumann. Thank you to you, dear listener. If you'd like to hear the rest of this episode in which Mike shares his consumer rant, trademark consumer rant, past consumer rants have, I would say, been legendary.
Yeah.
In which Baumann decries electric vehicles, soda stream,
water stations. Yeah.
Just really a lot of things over the years that he has brought to light. And I think used his voice for good. And he did that again in a really emotional way on the Patreon. I was moved by his rant. It's patreon.com/tippingpitches. $10 a month to sign up for the top tier where you get access to bonus episodes. There's also a tier for $5 if you just want to support us. You know the drill by now. Appreciate the patience as we've taken the last 2 weeks off. It's been restful and restorative, and I look forward to making great episodes into 2026 and beyond. Any parting thoughts? Do you want to renege on your critique of French cuisine? I'll give you a mulligan.
Nope. I'm standing my ground on this one. You shall not tread on me with your woke opinions. Do you want to admit that the Eiffel Tower is good? Like, what are we doing here?
Why would I admit something that's not true?
Jesus Christ. Shameful.
There's just way better buildings and way better tourist attractions in Paris. There just is.
You can see them both.
Let me just pull up a little Gemini action for you. Paris.
Stop. No.
Tourist. No, pull up Wikipedia. Paris tourist attractions. Look at this. 6 museums, I could say, that are better than the Eiffel Tower. Monuments. Arc de Triomphe, better. Well, Grand Palais, not better. Pantheon, better. Place Vendôme, better.
See, you're slipping into the mindset that we were talking about, Bobby.
Sacré-Cœur,
You need to allow yourself
Notre Dame,
to indulge in the beauty of nuance, right? That two things can be good at once, right?
At the same time, let me throw this back at you, though. And by the way, you're referencing a conversation that the listeners at this point haven't yet heard because they haven't on Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
Let me throw this back at you. We need to reserve space for critical thinking in society. We need to be able to say when we feel something could be better or left a little to be desired. And in this case, it's the Eiffel Tower. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alex Rodriguez. Tipping pitches.
Tipping pitches.
This is the one that I love the most.
Tipping pitches.
So we'll see you next week. See ya!